You're sitting at a red light. Nothing unusual. Your hands are on the wheel, your mind somewhere between your destination and your day. Then suddenly, lights flash behind you. A routine moment turns into a legal situation in seconds. And here's the part most drivers don't realize. What happens next isn't just about traffic rules. It's about your rights, your responsibilities, and decisions that could follow you for years. One small misunderstanding, one wrong assumption, and something ordinary becomes expensive, stressful, and legally complicated. So let me ask you this. When a simple traffic stop turns into a legal interaction, do you believe most drivers actually understand their rights and responsibilities? Or are they just guessing in the moment? I want you to answer that in the comments, because this is where real conversations start. Now, let's walk into this carefully, because traffic law in 2025 is not what it used to be. It has evolved. It has become more structured, more technology-driven, and in many ways, more strictly enforced. And if you don't understand how it works, you're not just at a disadvantage. You're exposed to risks you may not even see coming. At its core, traffic law is about regulation of conduct on public roads. But legally, it sits at the intersection of constitutional law, administrative law, and state-level enforcement authority. That means every traffic stop, every citation, every interaction with law enforcement is not just procedural, it is constitutional in nature. In my legal analysis, the most important starting point is understanding that traffic law is primarily governed at the state level. Each state writes its own rules: speed limits, right-of-way standards, licensing requirements, enforcement mechanisms. But those rules must operate within the boundaries of the U.S. Constitution. That's where the framework becomes interesting. Because even though states control traffic law, constitutional protections, especially under the Fourth Amendment, apply everywhere. The Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable searches and seizures. And legally speaking, a traffic stop is considered a seizure. That single idea changes everything. Courts would likely examine whether a stop was justified at its inception. Was there reasonable suspicion? Was there probable cause? Did the officer have a lawful basis to initiate the stop? These are not abstract questions. These are the exact questions courts use to determine whether evidence is admissible and whether your rights were respected. Historically, this framework has developed over decades of case law. The U.S. Supreme Court has consistently held that even minor traffic violations can justify a stop. That means something as small as a broken taillight or a rolling stop can legally open the door to a broader interaction. In my legal analysis, that creates a reality many drivers underestimate. The initial reason for a stop may be minor, but the legal implications can expand quickly depending on what happens next. Now layer onto that the Fifth Amendment, which protects against self-incrimination. During a traffic stop, drivers are often asked questions. Some are routine, some are investigatory. The distinction matters. There is a strong constitutional argument that drivers have the right to remain silent beyond basic identification requirements. But here's where nuance becomes critical. Silence must be exercised respectfully and lawfully. Misunderstanding this balance can escalate a situation unnecessarily. Courts would likely examine whether any statements were voluntary, whether rights were respected, and whether procedures were followed correctly. Again, the law is not just about what happens, it's about how it happens. Now let's talk about federal versus state dynamics, because this is where confusion often arises. Traffic enforcement is almost entirely handled by state and local authorities. However, federal constitutional standards act as a ceiling and sometimes a floor. States can impose stricter rules, but they cannot violate constitutional protections. For example, one state may have stricter distracted driving laws than another. One state may impose higher penalties for certain violations. But none can ignore constitutional safeguards like due process or protection from unreasonable searches. That balance is constantly being tested and interpreted through court decisions. And in 2025, technology is playing a major role in how traffic laws are enforced. Automated cameras, digital records, real-time data systems, these are reshaping enforcement. While they increase efficiency, they also raise legal questions about privacy, accuracy, and due process. In my legal analysis, courts would likely continue examining whether these technologies align with constitutional principles. Are drivers given proper notice? Is there an opportunity to challenge evidence? Are enforcement systems fair and consistent? These are not theoretical issues. They directly affect how laws are applied in everyday situations. Now let's shift to real-world impact, because this is where everything becomes personal. For the average driver, a traffic violation is not just a fine. It can mean points on your license, increased insurance costs, in some cases license suspension, and depending on the nature of the violation, it can escalate into more serious legal consequences. This is especially true when multiple factors are involved. A simple stop combined with another issue, documentation, compliance, or conduct, can quickly change the legal landscape. In my legal analysis, the biggest risk for drivers is not intentional misconduct, it's lack of awareness. It's assuming that a situation is no big deal, when legally it is being treated as something significant. That's why understanding practical consequences matters. What do you do during a stop? How do you communicate? What are you required to provide? What are you not required to say? These are not just behavioral questions. They are legal decisions. And while we're discussing rights, it's important to address the Second Amendment where applicable, particularly for lawful gun owners. Transporting or carrying a firearm introduces an additional layer of legal complexity. Laws vary significantly from state to state. Some require disclosure, some have specific storage requirements. Some impose strict limitations on where firearms can be present. There is a strong constitutional argument that the Second Amendment protects the right to keep and bear arms. However, courts have consistently recognized that this right is subject to regulation. Courts would likely examine whether regulations are consistent with historical tradition and public safety considerations, especially following recent Supreme Court decisions that emphasize historical analysis. In my legal analysis, lawful gun owners face a unique challenge. They must not only understand general traffic law, but also firearm-specific regulations that may apply during a stop. Non-compliance, even if unintentional, can carry serious legal consequences. That leads directly into the risks of non-compliance more broadly, failing to follow lawful instructions, providing incorrect documentation, misunderstanding legal obligations. These are the kinds of issues that turn routine stops into legal problems. And again, most of this is preventable. Not through confrontation, not through resistance, but through knowledge and lawful conduct. Now let's talk about the political and legislative reality. Traffic laws are constantly evolving. New regulations are introduced every year, often in response to safety concerns, technological changes, or public policy priorities. Some are widely supported, others are debated. Supporters argue that stricter laws improve safety, reduce accidents, and create accountability. There is merit to that argument. Data often supports the idea that enforcement can influence behavior. At the same time, critics raise concerns about over-enforcement, disproportionate impact, and the potential for minor violations to escalate unnecessarily. In my legal analysis, both perspectives deserve consideration. The challenge is finding a balance between safety and fairness, between enforcement and individual rights. Courts would likely continue to play a central role in maintaining that balance, interpreting laws, and ensuring they align with constitutional principles. Looking ahead, the long-term implications are clear. Traffic law will continue to become more integrated with technology. Enforcement will likely become more automated. Legal challenges will continue to shape how these systems operate. And for drivers, the expectation will remain the same. Understand the law, follow it, and engage with it responsibly. Because here's the reality. Every time you drive, you are participating in a legal system. Not in an abstract sense, but in a very real, immediate way. The rules are active, the standards are enforced, and your decisions matter. So as we come to the end of this discussion, I want to bring you back to where we started. That moment at the red light. It feels ordinary, it feels routine. But legally, it is part of a much larger framework, one that connects your daily actions to constitutional principles, court decisions, and evolving laws. In my legal analysis, the most important takeaway is simple but powerful. Do not rely on assumptions, rely on understanding, because the law does not pause to explain itself in the moment. It expects you to already know, and when you do know, everything changes. Your confidence changes, your decisions change. Your outcomes change. If this gave you a clearer perspective, take a moment to share your thoughts. Respectful discussion matters, and your perspective adds value to that conversation. And if you want more clear, professional breakdowns of laws that affect your everyday life, stay connected, because the rules of the road are always evolving. And the drivers who stay informed are the ones who stay protected. Drive with awareness, act with responsibility. And remember, your rights matter, but so does your understanding of them.